Kevin Bowen here. Don't forget to listen to The Fan now on 93.5 or 107.5 FM, and check out our latest coverage online at 1075thefan.com.
I don't believe what I just saw. That's kind of how I view last night, man. Kevin Bowen, Eddie Garrison, back, another edition of Kevin's Corner. That's one for the ages. 30 for 30 needs to start. I think early background information on that game needs to happen. Canton should, have some sort of section of their beautiful campus alluded to this game. That was incredible to watch, and the Colts win 12-9. The title of my story, Eddie, was Colts play ugly, win pretty. I don't even know if that's like the accurate description, but I woke up this morning off of about 3-ish hours of sleep, as I'm sure you did as well, and I felt like I was walking into the scene from The Hangover where they all wake up the next morning in just that fog, and the camera just continues to pan around that hotel room. That's literally how I felt in witnessing that one.
Yeah, it was not fun to listen or to watch, but it was kind of fun to listen to because with radio you can't see what's happening. So that is
so at
like
least your eyes aren't bleeding. Maybe
Correct.
your ears are bleeding, but your eyes aren't.
Correct, yeah. Matt and Rick, very good on the radio call, made it sound interesting, even though, frankly, it was anything close to that. I did see the clip last night that was circulating on TV of Al Michaels trying to save the game and make it seem like it was an interesting one, mentioning about how
Kirk Herbstreit wanted none of it.
Yeah, and Kirk was like, no, I don't think we've reached that point yet.
I think what stood out to me about last night, I don't know if I've ever seen NFL fans leaving a game like that when it's a beautiful night, 9:30 Mountain Time, and it's tied. And I consider Denver a pretty passionate fan base. I've always felt like that's one of the better road environments in the NFL. Result versus performance. It's something we do every single podcast, and we will continue to harp on that on this one. The result is a win. It's 2-2-1. It's a team that needs to find wins outside of the division, away from home, considering how the season has started. And you now will return from your mini bye week with just a monumental 2-game stretch with Jacksonville in your own building and at Tennessee. In those games, it goes without saying how critical they will be for AFC South hopes, playoff hopes, etc. So that's the result part of it. The performance part, Eddie, I feel worse about the Colts at 10:44 a.m. on Friday morning than I did at 10:44 a.m. yesterday morning. Mm-hmm. The offensive line looks broken to me. I think the desperation you saw from the staff in making those changes last night, which we'll obviously get into, is a sign of how broken they feel like it is. And it's a quarterback that I am so shocked by the mistakes he's making. Like, Matt Ryan does not have Carson Wentz scar tissue. And yet he is making plays that even Wentz didn't make last year. Wentz's dumb plays were more Houdini-like, trying to make the magic happen, believing something was still alive. Ryan's plays are plays that when Decatur Central takes the field tonight, Eddie, your former Hawks, if their quarterback throws the same pick that Matt Ryan just threw, their head coach is yelling at him.
Yep.
And those were the 2 interceptions last night. We got so much to unpack on the podcast. One day I will tell Max Bowen if he asks about this game, and I will say, your eyes will not be able to watch it. I don't want you to look at that. But just know that in a game of stink, the Colts stunk less. The Colts stunk less. I saw the ESPN stat, the first team to win a football game since 1973, with 0 touchdowns, at least 2 picks, and at least 6 sacks.
The other team was the Cleveland Browns.
That was the team in 73?
Yeah.
God, that's not great company.
It was the first time since 2007, 2008 that there was a game where the winning team won without a touchdown, or there wasn't a touchdown scored at all for the Colts in a win.
Do you think anybody at ESPN in charge of programming for the NFL is thinking, how do we take the Colts off Monday Night Football?
We were actually talking about that.
Do you think they're like, can we flex
last night?
the Colts?
If anything, I could see them being flexed when they play Pittsburgh.
Well,
that would be the game on Monday night that I think they would flex.
I was joking a little bit. Can they really flex Monday night games now?
I don't know.
I thought that was not allowed, but yeah, I'm thinking, boy.
I'm sure the league will try and find some way.
This is the prime time. And Russell Wilson, I don't know if he was concussed late or what, but that was horrific. One thing I want to mention before we get into what I liked, what I didn't like, just kind of my overall big picture about the game. The tone afterwards. I loved what I was hearing from the Colts locker room.
I did too.
I thought it was extreme acknowledgement from the players of this standard is not acceptable. And in such a moment where you're on a short week, craving a win, you got to be so happy to finally have a weekend off. You haven't had a weekend off in quite a while. For them to acknowledge that, I'm like, man, that is a locker room filled with some high character guys. And at times I feel like, and this could be said, I think, for really any professional sports team, but I think at times players just don't necessarily walk there right after a game. The Colts did that. I mean, Quentin Nelson called it disgusting. Michael Pittman was like, yeah, we won, but I know I'm going to feel real bad watching the film. And I thought you saw that from a lot of guys in that locker room. I did not get that same sentiment watching the Frank Reich press conference, nor hearing Jim Irsay talk with Wish TV after the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring that up because you need to make sure that the rose-colored glasses that I heard from the head coach and owner after that game are not being worn after that plane landed in Indianapolis last night. Because that type of performance, this continued offensive abomination, is inexcusable. And honestly, Eddie, and this might sound a bit harsh, I think it's kind of a slap in the face at your fan base if you're going to sit there and act like all is good and well. And for Frank Reich not even to answer a question about the offensive performance when Zach Kiefer asked it, I'm like, whoa. First off, that's very rare for Frank. And I'm like, geez, how do you not sit there and be like, 12 points last night, 20 points in the last 7 games or less. You've had 2 of those go to overtime. First time since 1993. The Colts franchise has gone through a stretch of 7 straight games with 20 points or less. This gets back to a root that I've talked about with this organization that I'm worried about. When you refuse to kind of look in the mirror and acknowledge there are some problems, do it in a public manner. I think that's really important. I think it's important for a lot of people in life, but obviously they have much more of a public platform than 99% of society does. I start to get this feeling, Eddie, and I know it's early October, but this is just my thoughts right now. And I think this podcast, we try to make sure that we live in a present, but also acknowledge when the future thoughts are kind of creeping in. The future thought right now in my mind is this season will be brushed under the rug. This season will be viewed as the Pagano-Grigson 2015 season. As the, okay, that wasn't good. We're going to give you another chance. And if that includes the quarterback, if that includes the decision makers, I think that's a very, very rose-colored approach to looking at this season. It's a very wishful thinking. And I think the message that, again, the owner expressed afterwards, Frank Reich, that stuff just naturally seeps into your building. It naturally seeps into a level of acceptance. Everything's good. Everything's okay. Irsay's contract extensions. Everything's good without winning a division title. We're good.
Yeah.
Look at that. We both got contracts for, X amount of more years. And in particular, I'm probably a bit disappointed in Jim Irsay more than anyone else in that Jim's a very vocal guy on social media.
Mm-hmm.
He can be very vocal after games. And the only times we've heard him this season is after wins. The Kansas City performance, and then last night. He tweeted up a storm leading into that Tennessee game.
You're talking about just speaking to the media? Is that what you're referring to, or in general? Because he did talk after that Jacksonville game. on Twitter.
Okay, yeah, I don't think a lot.
No.
If he did. I guess I'm more referring to the Tennessee game.
Okay.
In that you lead into that week with all these tweets, and hell, I think if it was up to him, he would hit send about 37 more times. All these tweets about the importance of that game, and it's a home game, so you have 60-some thousand season ticket members in the building, and you have that performance, and yet you say nothing on Twitter after that game, after that performance. Like, I feel like it's my mom watching me play high school golf, and if I shot 36 in a 9-hole match or 42 in a 9-hole match, she would act like my name would be in the paper the next day no matter what. It's like, no. I think people respect when you come out in times of disappointment, poor performances, whatever, and you acknowledge it, and you admit that that's not the standard that you want, and I just don't feel that from this organization right now. I don't feel it from the top down. I didn't feel it from Irsay last night, and obviously after the Tennessee game, there was none of it. And again, that's just I think it's a dangerous path to create. It's probably just a lazy comparison, but I don't feel like you would have gotten that from like a Belichick after a game, a Mike Tomlin after a game, people like that. And who knows, maybe in the immediate aftermath of a Thursday night game, that's all it was. But I think over the past couple of years, the bar has been lowered. I think that's really, really disappointing. So that is a concern that I have. Again, love what the locker room had. Did not love what I saw from some of those leaders. So, I totally can acknowledge I might be overreacting to some of that. So I acknowledge if people want to push back on that. But I think of an owner of an NFL team in a market like this, I think your fan base deserves some consistency in when you're going to chatter. And it shouldn't just be in the glorious moments. I think it should be in the moments that don't go as well. I think people tend to respect that. And right now, that's not there.
One question that I have before we get into what you liked and didn't like from the game. You mentioned that the possibility of this season getting brushed under the rug and the team and Reich and Ballard getting another chance. Could you make the argument, though, even after last year with the whole Carson Wentz experiment, that this year was the one more chance? And then if you add on, okay, you have one more shot. You have one more shot. It's almost like you're saying, okay, we're going to break up. We're going to break up. But you never break up.
Yeah, that's probably a good analogy. I just never felt like we got that from Irsay publicly. I don't know. Maybe he did deliver that behind closed doors. I don't think he did from everything that I have heard. I don't think that was there. You guys have heard me say endlessly the seat warmer analogy. Yep. I think that's super relevant, and I don't feel like that pressure is being applied. And I just think, look at this Colts operation. Eddie, when some natural back has been against the wall after losses, after multiple losses, a lot of people counting them out, injuries, they deliver. So if you naturally can create some of that, maybe you would deliver even more than you would as AFC South favorites in each game this season, and you haven't been able to win any of those 3 games. So I just wanted to get that out. And kind of lay a little bit of the groundwork, if you will, of where my mindset is exiting last night. But let's get into what I liked and what I didn't like.
Obviously, the defense is the part that you would like the most if you're any Colts fan or in this case yourself.
Eddie, I think an issue for the Colts this season through 4 weeks has been your star players have not lived up to the check they get in their locker room.
Hello, DeForest Buckner.
Probably direct deposit now that I think about it. Hello, DeForest Buckner. I thought hello, Kenny Moore on a huge play that took a touchdown off the board. Gilmore probably doesn't deserve to be in the other categories, but still, I think you wanted to see Gilmore make plays that literally it's not just the ball's not thrown in my direction. The ball is thrown in my direction, and then I'm making a play that changes the game. Let's start up front. Buckner. He looked so limited to me on Sunday against Tennessee. Obviously, the elbow brace is massive. Everyone can see it. 19 snaps, I think it was. He didn't record a tackle. That is very rare for a guy that has the amount of production that he has. 8 tackles last night, 2 sacks, pass defense. I thought he was the reason Yannick Ngakoue got that sack.
Yeah.
His stunt, I thought, freed up Ngakoue for that sack. And you think about one of those sacks that he had on his own was on a 2nd and goal where, not to say Denver was ever going to find the end zone, but they sure as hell were a lot closer than the Colts were to finding the end zone. Who knows? If you don't make that play, and not only does Buckner record the sack on that 2nd and goal, then his mate next to him blocks the field goal on that same drive.
Big Grove.
Wings all weekend for Big Grove. Kitchen sink wings on deck for the Stewart household. Huge block. I mentioned the Kenny Moore. Again, Gilmore, the interception, and the pass broken up to obviously ice the game. We can get into Russell Wilson. I'm not sure what Wilson was thinking and feeling like he had to give Cortland Sutton a chance. I'm like, you got Judy and Hamler, and you're staying away from Gilmore. If you look on the other side of the field, clearly that comment's being discussed in Denver.
When I watched that replay, sorry to cut in here, but when I watched that replay over and over, I don't think he was going to Sutton. I think he was going to Hamler and never saw Sutton coming across because
did his eyes ever go to the right side?
I guess that is true.
I felt like his eyes were always to the left. And
I thought like last second he kind of shifted toward the middle of the field and then he just kind of threw it. I don't know.
Again, the fact that we're discussing this shows you how poor of a play it was. I honestly thought the 3rd and 4, which Gilmore picked off, was the more egregious error.
Oh, yes.
Because there was room to scramble there for a first down. You pretty much ice the game if you do that. Let alone, like, that's a ball that's got to be a jump ball in the back corner of the end zone, your guy or no guy.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, he thinks he can fit a ball into a window. And if you kick the field goal there and you go up 6, I know the Colts got somewhat close to getting a touchdown there, but I have no hope in the Colts getting in the end zone at that point.
One other player I want to mention defensively before you get into Alec Pierce and Chase McLaughlin, I thought Rodney Thomas was exceptional last night.
I'm glad you said that. I had him down as he doesn't qualify in the star not living up to paycheck category, but he deserves a mention. And think about this, Eddie. He gets thrown in the fire in the middle of a game against Patrick Mahomes. And 2 weeks later, he's got Russell Wilson. Deep ball throwers, for sure. And outside of an official taking him out, that dude has been tremendous.
He would have had 2, I think.
And just making plays, keeping the top on the defense, some of those cliches. He looks like a really good athlete.
Good center fielder.
Yeah, and at Yale, he wasn't primarily a safety. He bounced around to several different spots, a little linebacker, some corner. There are some questions about what he would play at this level. So a huge shout-out to Rodney Thomas II for a 7th-round pick to be doing that big time. I thought he deserved the interception. It was almost like fielding a punt.
Yeah.
I thought he has played such good football that he deserved that. And lastly, before we move on, just getting back to the stars delivering for you, no Leonard, no Blackman, no Taylor on offense. Short week.
You lose Hines on the 3rd play of the game.
Lose Hines early. You lose Kelly in the first half. These are games where I'd like to think guys like Buckner and Kenny and Gilmore say to themselves, this is why they brought me here. This is why they're paying me the amount of money. Granted, Kenny might say that's not enough. But I like to think that they feel that, they relish that, and they acted upon it. As much as I think Gilmore deserves the game ball, I could make an argument Buckner deserves it more. I mean, he was just outstanding, again, playing with a big-time brace on that elbow. So the defensive stars, I'm not ready to say this defense is like pencil it into top 5, top 7 the entire season. But you look back on these last 3 weeks, really good with Mahomes in the rush plan, really good last night. Again, Denver aided you, certainly, in some areas, but I thought pretty good last night. Yes, Henry gashed you a bit, so that is one that I probably can't group in there, but this unit has shown me more flashes of this could be a top 10 defense than obviously the offense. It can't even be top 30.
I thought it was also important to note that Frank Reich kind of opened the curtain up a little bit on DeForest Buckner last night, said it was that he's dealing with a very significant injury that would probably sit out some guys, but just Buck is going to go out there and play, and he's allowed to play because of that huge-ass brace.
Yep, and again, kudos to him. Toughness will never be questioned with DeForest Buckner whatsoever.
Offensively, Alec Pierce is probably the only bright spot.
Yeah, just tremendous by Pierce. And, Eddie, part of being a rookie is, how do you bounce back from adversity? And week 1 was not good. It was a drop, and then unfortunately it was a concussion for him. But that drop in the end zone, I was curious, man, I like his demeanor. I feel like he had a lot of clutch moments in college, but naturally you just worry about how a kid's going to bounce back from that. And boy, has he ever. You watch him play, and this can be at Grand Park. And, Pierce, I feel fortunate that the Colts drafted him because I felt like I watched him enough in college to already have an idea of this. But you watch him play, and right away, when you go to his bio, you're like, oh, that makes total sense. He comes from a family of high-level athletes.
Oh, yeah.
It makes total sense. He's got a volleyball background. It makes total sense that this is a guy that was in the backyard probably every single minute of every single day playing some sort of sport with his 2 Division I college basketball brothers, or, again, his parents that were Division I athletes. There is just a natural athleticism, innate feel of ball catch.
Yep.
I mean, some of these Matt Ryan balls to him are like ducks. Bradley Chubb got a hand on one of those last night.
Yeah, I was about to say that, yeah.
Can easily be picked off by opposing players. And there's Pierce, just seemingly not panicking, knowing where the ball's coming, and just, making a play. Like, if I want someone to catch Aaron Judge's next home run, I want Alec Pierce in the outfield. I mean, I just feel like he's the guy that you trust so much. And the fact that, Denver flirted with Patrick Surtain on him at some parts late in the game, I think sent a message. Obviously there are questions about the other wideouts, Campbell, Doolin, Patman, etc., Strawn. But I said at the start of the year, you're trying to hit on 16 or 17 with Campbell and with Pierce, and you really need to hit on both.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't hit on Campbell, of course, or they busted on Campbell so far. But Pierce, it looks like you got a 4 with 17, or you got a 5 with 16 right now. And again, for him to come back from week 1, I think that kind of adds to it for me. So, great work by Alec Pierce. It's going to be needed. Pittman's going to feel it all season long.
Second consecutive game for Pitt without a catch in the second half. He only had 2 targets.
Gosh, was it again the second half? Goose egg? Man.
Yeah.
I did think at the end of regulation, Pierce wasn't on the field. I tweeted out these snap counts, Eddie. This has got to change.
Pierce had 5 of the 10 completions for Matt Ryan. In the second half specifically, Ryan was 10 for 18 with 78 yards. Pierce had 5 targets, 5 catches, 51 yards.
Pittman plays every snap but one, 78 to 79. Campbell plays 73, Pierce 47. That Campbell-Pierce has got to flip. I get it's a little bit of a different skill set, but no. Pierce and he's starting to show more of a route tree.
Oh, yeah.
Which were questions that you had as well.
I know he fumbled, but I thought he flashed a little bit of his speed over the middle.
Agreed. I will say this about the fumbles. The Colts have had really good fumble luck this year. I mean, last night they fumbled 4 times, right, and got all 4 back?
I thought it was only like 2 or 3. I didn't realize it was 4.
Ryan fumbled.
I know he fumbled twice. Recovered his own.
Pierce, and didn't Nelson have the other fumble recovery?
Oh, yeah.
Isaiah Rodgers muffed a punt.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about Rodgers muffing the punt.
And I go back to, remember Hines muffing that one week 1? I mean, that easily could have been ball on the ground there. Yeah, that's crazy, man. Fumbles lost this year. Just 4 fumbles lost, and they fumbled it 16 times.
At some point, that's going to catch up, right?
Yeah, and that's, again, this kind of adds to what I was saying earlier of how do you feel moving forward? I'm like, you keep putting it on the turf, other team's going to pounce on it, a few of these times there. But still, Alec Pierce, good work.
Chase McLaughlin is the last thing that you said you liked.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I tweeted out late last night, Eddie. I thought win, lose, or tie, they should have carried McLaughlin off the field like he was Rudy.
Yeah.
First off, I love how he looks. Doesn't he look like an old school kicker?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if he's just not in the 2022 jersey collection, and maybe Hot Rod had that one, and they just can't get that jersey back. But
the unelastic,
the
long sleeves like Eli Manning.
God, he looks like a dad, which is great. Good for Chase. 48, 51, 52. Eddie, I felt like they all were pretty much down the middle.
Yes.
And Matt Hawk on the snap. Luke Rhodes had a very high snap on one of them. Even the one in overtime, I think, was a tad high. Good work there by the punter. And, I felt this way about Chase McLaughlin when he replaced Adam Vinatieri in 2019. I like his demeanor. And I know I've used that word now with Pierce and him, but I think at kicker, right or wrong, I had questions about the previous kicker and his demeanor. By no means is Chase McLaughlin some rare, talented kicker compared to some of the other NFL kickers. Like, clearly there are other NFL kickers that are more talented than him. Mm-hmm. But I just like how he carries himself. And to make those three from those distances, dude, kicking has been such an issue for this franchise, particularly on longer kicks in recent years. Chase McLaughlin, boom, boom, boom. I guess another boom because he made the other one from 31 to send it into overtime. And obviously you saw Brandon McManus miss one with Grover Stewart getting his big paw up there for the block because that's something you're worried about on those longer kicks. Mm-hmm. Do you get those blocks? So we didn't focus on it too much out of Tennessee, and I need to go back and still watch that kick in Tennessee. Some people are saying the laces were in on that 51-yarder that hit Shapiro's deli. It was so far left. The fact that you didn't attempt the 56 or 57-yarder, was another kind of bad stain on your kicking effort last week. To come back and do that, hey, man, anytime you got to win ugly, your kicker's usually a big part of it. Chase McLaughlin was.
Before we get into what you didn't like, you've already kind of touched on it, but just want to go over a little bit of the snap counts from last night. Nick Cross did not play a single snap defensively. He saw 6 special teams snaps.
Gosh, that's even a low special teams number.
Brandon Faison played 24 snaps defensively. Isaiah Rodgers played 34. So
I want to see that gap widen. I want to see more and more of Rodgers.
Yep, and Dio played 40 last night, and of course, probably a large part of that was Kwity Paye going down with that, what is to believe, high ankle sprain, but we'll know more about that later today. You've already kind of touched upon this right at the intro of the show, or the pod, I should say, that what you didn't like was the offensive line and Matt Ryan's performance.
Yeah, where should we start first?
You can start with the O-line. Because everything starts up in front. In the trenches.
I didn't realize they would use that clip, but they used that clip leading into the broadcast last night on Amazon, and I believe the phrase that I used was, the Colts offense has been awful. Little did I know that over the next 3 hours, that statement that I made would have been a compliment about the Colts offense. Calling them awful last night would be a compliment. With where they started. You said you want to go O-line first?
Correct, yeah. When did they even record that, by the way?
So they recorded, when were they in the studio? Was it Tuesday? Yeah, so it was the Hard Knocks crew, NFL Films. It was the same crew with Hard Knocks, or a few of the similar guys, I should say. Great guys. They recorded us for about a half hour, and they said that it could be part of the intro. So, yeah, that was nice to see. Maddie was like, whoa. Can you rewind that?
Wow, she was watching?
She was before she fell asleep, which thankfully to her, because her eyes are not bleeding like mine are still bleeding this morning. She woke up and was like, 9 to 6? What in the world? And I'm like, yeah, be grateful you've been in REM sleep for the last 2 hours. Okay, when I saw the O-line thing, because that was, right when we saw it, Amazon, popped it up there as like, this is going to be the new starting offensive line. And we had Jeff Saturday on our morning show today, and I threw this question to him. Eddie, I cannot recall an offensive line changing a healthy offensive line, changing 3 starters in 1 week, let alone doing it in a week with no practice. Mm-hmm. It is one of the wilder moves I've ever seen. Part of me was like, wow, I kind of respect this. I'm like, this is clearly admitting that there are issues up front. This is quite the move. And then part of me thought, that is the most outrageous thing in the world. You're going to get Matt Ryan killed. These guys, and let me harp on this for just a second. Eddie, you were at Grand Park for a few practices. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate to be there for all 16 practices. If you say the starting offense practices 4 different periods a day, typically, those periods run 10 to 12 plays. And that would be what, 16 times 4 is 64? So 64 periods of training camp practice. I would say the line we saw to start last night, Ryman at left tackle, Nelson at left guard, Ryan Kelly at center, Braden Smith at right guard, Matt Pryor at right tackle. I would say we saw that group together for 3 of the 64 periods. So
yeah, it wasn't many.
Do your math on that, the percentage. It's not like that was a group that was out there for 2 straight days. They explored with it for a week. They tried it for 12 periods. They barely tried it. It was not like they ever were thinking to themselves, this could be an alternative line and we want to get used to. Because think about that. Those are some drastic moves. I mean, Ryman is becoming a starter at left tackle. Braden Smith is going to a position he has not played in 5 years. Matt Pryor, the guy that trained all offseason long to flip his hips and get used to the left side of the line, is now being asked to go to the right side of the line. I mean, those are 3, big-time moves. And the Colts barely tried it in camp. So I'm like, what in the world? Then I started to do the math. Nelson, highest paid guard. Kelly, 3rd highest paid center. Braden Smith would be the 2nd highest paid guard. I mean, can you imagine?
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money for an O-line group that gave up 6 sacks. There's a whole lot to get to with O-line. I'm going to wait for a few of my thoughts with Twitter questions. Again, I think Bernard Ryman just got whistled for another flag. If I'm not.
I thought one of those holdings was a little egregious.
I thought Gilmore getting away with the hold on Sutton on the final play, to me, made up for the poor whistle the Colts got early in the game. I thought the Colts got a couple poor whistles. Quick whistles.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be the better way to describe it. Ryman being a culprit on that.
So was San Diego.
I forgot the referee said that. 21 sacks now for Matt Ryan. Just a reminder, Andrew Luck was sacked 18 times in his entire season with Frank Reich. Phillip Rivers was sacked 19 times in his entire season with Frank Reich. Matt Ryan has been sacked 21 times. And Eddie, I don't believe we've reached Columbus Day on the holiday calendar. We still have Halloween. We still have Christmas. We still have Kwanzaa. We still have Hanukkah. We still have
New Year's.
We still have, Martin Luther King Day, maybe, if the Colts are going to get on a run. That's a bit far-fetched by me, but you get where I'm coming from on that. Wow about the O-line. It is broken. It's a 10-day break that you enter and you think to yourself, do you do hey, we're going to blue the canal next week, and if you come out with us, you can pick who starts at right guard. Should Blue do his football toss? He's like, all right, Will Fry's football. If I make this, you start at right guard this week. I'm trying to think of, someone mentioned to me earlier today, maybe Irsay can do an Abby's hat pick. I feel like we haven't had those in a while.
I wonder if
decide the starting line.
I wonder if Irsay, Reich, or Ballard or anybody talked to Andrew Whitworth last night.
Seriously. Yeah, exactly. Did Joe Wrights make the trip? Can he gain some weight?
Right. I will say, though, I thought the line did block better in the run game.
Yeah, you were around 4 yards per carry there?
Yeah, 4.1. And if you just look at Jackson and Lindsey, 24 carries, 102 yards.
It's, it is just such an issue for this team right now. It's wild to think that, again, October 7th, the highest paid offensive line, and I literally can pencil one guy into his starting job in week 6. That would be Quentin Nelson at left guard. We're going to get into O-line combinations in Twitter questions, so let's save that.
Some quick thoughts on Matt Ryan, though, because
Eddie, I am confused. I'm shaking my head quite often watching him with some of these decisions. Is he under siege? Without question. But this is a 15-year vet. This is the number 3 overall pick. This is a guy that's played football at an extraordinarily high level in the NFL. His recognition of pressure, down and distance, time and score, his general feel, there are some egregious mistakes in those areas. And I'm like, part of me wants to be like, he's got to get that corrected, right? But then part of me wants to be like, man, is this a byproduct of Father Time? Of 15 years of like Atlanta's O-line wasn't great. Hell, he's probably begging for Atlanta. I feel like Matt Ryan's begging for Atlanta's O-line, and the Colts are begging for Carson Wentz's decision-making right now. It's like the Spider-Man meme.
Yeah. Yeah.
The 2nd and 9 interception, Eddie.
Is that the one where you threw it in like quadruple coverage?
Right.
Is that 10 for Pittman or Granson?
Sure. Yeah.
I can't remember.
One of them. I think 3 more Denver defenders would have been in the way. That one was odd. I watched the replay several times. I'm thinking, was he shocked he had that much time? He felt like naturally he's like, oh, shoot, I shouldn't be holding on to this ball anymore. I just got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And then the second interception I thought it was the backbreaker. It was the 3rd and 15. You're back at what, like your own 20, and that ball was like an 8 to 10 yard route. I mean, that ball is not going for a first down there. And at that point, I get it's chaotic. I get it's an NFL game. It's a crazy environment, but Matt Ryan's he's done this 200 some times in his career. Matt Ryan's got to walk out of that huddle and think, all right, my defense is playing well. I think the score was 9-6 at the time, or maybe it was 6-all. Like, I just need to be smart with it here. 3rd and 15, if we're not going to check it down, let's just get rid of it. And again, he throws the ball over the middle, and that's the decision. The other play that I thought was just really, really not smart was there was a 3rd and 10 in the 4th quarter, Eddie. The Colts were probably right on like that 56-ish range, which, if you believe the NBC kick meter, Chase McLaughlin was, good from 60 a lot last night. That's one of those where you probably do want to be checked down, Charlie, and, get it to 4th and 5, and now Chase is kicking from 52. And on 3rd and 10, he takes a sack when pre-snap, you felt that pressure pre-snap from the right side.
Yeah.
There was no like subtle movement in the pocket to the left side. And I think it's just one of those plays where you just got to either get out of the pocket or get that ball out of bounds in a obviously non-intentional grounding sort of throw there. And I don't think my bar is stupid high for Matt Ryan. I just expect better smarts than what he's displaying. I'm at a loss of words, to be frank with you. And I sit there
Nice
and think,
pun.
yeah, God, I didn't even mean it like that. I sit here and think, you know what? I mean, at least you didn't give up a first-round pick for him, but you also got a $35 million cap hit coming next year. 7th highest in the NFL. 11 fumbles, 7 interceptions. It is turnover, crippling type plays that you just cannot have. And I think it's a reminder, Eddie, of like, think back to the Kansas City game. What we said after that game was this offensive line play cannot continue. Well, it did.
And it has.
Against Tennessee, and then all of a sudden you make 3 huge starting lineup changes 2 weeks later. Well, I kind of feel the same way about Matt Ryan right now of you cannot have that. And the fact that people are literally sending me Sam Ehlinger, probably Ehlinger more than Foles, literally sending me Sam Ehlinger questions on if he should start for this football team right now, and it's October 7th, and I'm not immediately laughing at those questions, is extremely alarming for the state of the quarterback position. Not long-term. You guys know, I've said this for several years now. The most important question that needs to be answered of this season is, who's your long-term quarterback? Last year you had a potential for that answer in Wentz. Obviously, that did not happen. But the fact that in the short term, people are literally bringing up, should Matt Ryan be benched, and I'm not immediately laughing at that, is a huge issue. Some nice resolve late. He definitely had some throws that were good. I mean, there were some other throws that, God bless Alec Pierce. Calling him Alex. Jim Irsay's videos rubbing off of me. God bless Alec Pierce, or else, those balls are incomplete or picked off in those situations there. It might sound harsh, but again, it's a $35 million cap hit, but I don't need to see Matt Ryan play quarterback again for the Colts.
Yeah, I can get behind what you're saying. Don't know if I fully agree with it because of the money aspect of it.
Sure, and I know that it's very complicated, and maybe that's a throwaway statement by me here on the pod, but that's just where I'm at right now. It's a question that I almost feel like has to be asked weekly, and right now, that's where I'm at.
I get it. I mean, Colts fans are there with you. I think this is a question that I wanted to ask you, but I saw it was a Twitter question, so I'm laying off of it. This is coming from David, and something that we've discussed multiple times already in previous podcasts is that why does this win feel like a loss? I will not lie, the offense looks decent when they go no huddle, so why don't we just stick with it? Keeps the defense on their heels since they can rarely substitute, keeps the game running at our tempo, and allows that slow, methodical movement down the field. Nevertheless, still think this win was more of a loss overall. Looking forward to the pod.
Yeah, some quicker tempo stuff probably should be explored. As far as the feeling, again, it gets back to result and performance. The result, it keeps you relevant. And I know there's a section of the fan base, Eddie, I don't know how big it is right now, but there's certainly a section that says, if winning the AFC South means that it's status quo again next year, I don't want that to happen. The performance yesterday gives me no confidence or belief that this is a team that can do something in January. And when you look at a 2-2-1 football team right now, 2-2-1 should indicate average, right?
Yeah.
2 wins, 2 losses, and a tie. So you've played 20 quarters. Let's throw out the 2 overtime periods. You've played 20 quarters. The Colts have been the superior football team in how many of those quarters?
I would say 9.
I would say that's very generous.
I just look at that entire second half against Tennessee. Or not even 9, not 9. Then I would say 6. 6 is more realistic.
I'm struggling to maybe even get to say. I thought around 4. And again, maybe I'm being too harsh, but the fourth quarter of Houston certainly pops into that. Was it the second quarter of Kansas City, third quarter of Kansas City? One of those pops into that. I mean, again, superior football team. Last night, they were not the superior football team in any of those quarters. Certainly Jacksonville, they were not the superior football team in any of those quarters. And that's just where I struggle to find a lot of confidence of repetitive play, consistent play, even if it's just a game and a half out of these first 5. I haven't felt that yet. So I think, David, that is where it gets to be a loss. Not to mention, when you throw out the wild ESPN stat of the first time since 1973 a team wins a game like this, it's just, you realize that this is not sustainable. Not sustainable at all.
One thing I would like to not really harp on, but throw in here with that question is, I feel like Frank Reich is a better play caller and is more creative when they go no huddle in the quicker tempo. I feel like the decisions come a lot quicker to him. And I think the offense, just in general, flows a lot better. And you see the bigger plays in the run game. You get Paris Campbell involved in screen passes and in the underneath game. And then it allows you to get those other receivers, not just Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, and Paris Campbell involved, like the tight ends, for example.
Very fair. Very fair.
And Jonito, I say that right?
Yes.
If we win, do you trust this team to win the division after they found a way to win without Taylor? Technically, we are in first place now.
Jacksonville, who do they got? Is it Jacksonville, Houston this weekend, and Tennessee Commanders?
Yes. I know the second part of that. I'm checking Jacksonville real quick.
So I guess that's the opportunity for both those teams to win. But granted, if it's the AFC South, I would guess there's probably a better chance both those teams lose. Oh gosh, people are making memes of Frank Reich on mail that they get, putting 0 touchdowns next to it. Okay, give that to me one more time. Taylor, without Taylor, they won.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you trust this team to win the division after we found a way to win without Taylor?
I don't trust them, but Eddie, I don't trust Jacksonville or Tennessee either. I don't want to bet on any of them. I don't.
I wouldn't either.
There's probably a reason why all their odds are in the plus, right? Plus 150, plus 190, plus 200.
Because Vegas doesn't know either.
Literally, and that's rare to see that. So I don't trust any of them, which, for as I said, there's a section of the fan base earlier that wants to, they take 2 steps back if it's going to mean significant changes. I also acknowledge there's a section of the fan base that says, screw that, I want to win the division. This football team hasn't played a home playoff game in 7 years. I want to feel that.
Fair.
I can sit there and acknowledge that as well. So I understand that this is definitely a relevant question to some chunk of the fan base.
Mondo, I should be happy, but how can you be happy after watching almost 5 quarters of that?
Yeah, man. Is the product boring? Yeah, I think there's like an entertainment element to sports that right now the Colts lack that. I mean, 7 straight games of 20 points or less. We're talking about the NFL. We're talking about 2 of those 7 games included extra time for overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about, not necessarily last night, but Eddie, we're talking about bad defenses in those games. I tweeted this out before the game yesterday. So this streak now has reached 7 straight games of 20 points or less. That is the longest for the franchise since '93. To make matters worse, these are the defensive scoring rankings of the teams you played in that stretch. So just to get a general idea of
I don't even want to know this.
What the defenses were at point allowed wise entering that contest. I don't have Denver. Denver was what, top 5 last night in scoring defense entering the game?
Yeah, I think they were like 4th.
Yeah. So Denver would obviously be the outlier. Before last night, 29, 19, 28, 27, 31, 26. Those were the defensive rankings of the teams you've played in this stretch. So take out the 19, which I believe is the Chiefs, if I'm not mistaken. That means 5 of the 6 teams you had played were in the basement of the NFL in scoring defense. That would be alarming to me if I were named Jim Irsay or Chris Ballard or Frank Reich, but especially Jim Irsay.
Eric makes a good point here. How can the Colts offensive line go to Arizona last year with all the injured players and players on the COVID list and move the ball up and down the field, and this season they can't put 2 plays together with the O-line?
Boy, Eric, it's so true. Eddie, I've thought a lot about what the Colts should do, and this is kind of where I'm at. Short term, if I'm only thinking short term for the O-line, like we're just trying to win next week. We're just trying to win, here in 2022. I probably would try Dennis Kelly at left tackle. I know his experience in the NFL is mainly at right tackle. I would try that. He's got 4 practices this week. See if, he can get up to speed, and obviously you got to help him. You got to help him a little bit more than you've helped. I understand Reich's dilemma. He knows he needs to get guys out on route trees and stuff like that, but I think you got to help. Obviously, Nelson at left guard. Eddie, I'd start Danny Pinter at center. I would bench Ryan Kelly. I know that that's probably not what they will do. Financially, it's certainly not what you would want from a return on investment standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm putting too much stock into a couple quarters last night, but I would probably go with Pinter.
Even last year.
Ryan Kelly has obviously had last year just an absolutely tragic and horrific life event happen to him.
Oh, yeah.
And I just feel like his play, I know a lot of people have asked me, have pointed to that as like kind of his downfall. I probably would point back to, honestly, ever since he signed the extension, which was, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was the COVID year. I think that was fall of 2020. I feel like since then, he hasn't played up to the level that you
got
need.
Some water over there, right?
Yeah, I do. I apologize for that. And now it's just kind of, he was a top 20 pick. He went to Alabama. He's got some name recognition, so he gets voted to Pro Bowls. And Kirk Herbstreit says one of the better centers in the league because Kirk doesn't have 6 days a week to get into his Colts prep. He's got a lot of college football in his mind. And then I'd go right guard. I'd probably go Matt Pryor. I know he lost a little bit of weight in trying to make the transition to tackle, but I still think he's got a frame that I would like to see at guard. And then I'd leave Braden Smith at tackle. That would be short term. If I went long term, probably all of it's the same, and then I'd leave Ryman at left tackle.
Crazy part about Ryan Kelly is that they haven't even reached the 2 more expensive parts on the contract. This year making $9.75 million. Next year it bumps up to $12.375, and the following year $14.625. On the cap it right there.
Yeah, those are numbers that are going to take a long, hard look. We haven't seen many cap casualties in the Chris Ballard era, but that one is going to take some honest questions. One more thing I'll throw in the long term. Maybe you take Pryor out and you put Will Fries in at right guard. Now, you're really young with that group. That would be Ryman, Nelson, Pinter, Fries, and Braden Smith. But, gosh, it is just literally, you hand Chris Strasser. I mean, Chris Strasser was jumping for joy in the postgame locker room. I don't blame him. I mean, you literally hand him the depth chart and you say, all right, Quentin Nelson and Sharpie at left guard, nobody else. Like, even Braden Smith at guard, man, it's like, I think you leave Braden Smith at tackle. I get has Braden Smith been, what's he paid, the 6th highest right tackle in the league, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe he's been the 13th best right tackle in the league this year. But it's not to the level to where, did I see Matt Pryor allowed the most pressures of any player in the NFL this season?
Yep.
Last night?
Yep.
9 of them?
Yeah.
He had one where Bradley Chubb, if I'm Bradley Chubb, I'd be like, dude, are you throwing the game? You didn't even block me.
Yeah, there were a couple of those last night. Because I saw it on Twitter.
Right?
Yeah, I saw it on Twitter that somebody said, you remember that drill that you teach in Pee Wee football, players to follow the defensive players so they can learn on how to block without their hands? Well, Matt Pryor just did that in a game.
Amazon saw that in real life. The Amazon audience saw that last night in real life. A lot of Amazon jokes on Twitter last night.
We move on to Patrick. I'm not sure how it's possible to have the most expensive, yet the worst offensive line in the league. It's quite baffling to me. Also, I think part of the issue is Matt Ryan is holding onto the football a little too long and double tapping for what it seems like 6 to 7 seconds. Is it worth at this point to try and trade for an offensive lineman? I'm not sure what resources we have to do that, but something has to change.
Yeah, I mean, trade again, in the back of your mind, guys, you always got to think about the future quarterback and how you're going to acquire that guy.
And you've got to think about the chemistry within the line itself, too.
And if you win 7 or 8 games and you're drafting 14 or 15, something like that, it's going to take quite a lot to move up. There is blame, Eddie, to be had on the offensive line. There is blame that is on Matt Ryan. There's blame on some of the Colts skill players. There's certainly a lot of that. It is just surprising to me. The Colts have lacked their support that they guaranteed Matt Ryan, and at the same time, Matt Ryan has lacked what the Colts felt like they were going to get between the years. I think to try and summarize it, that's where I'm at. And look, I want to credit him for some of the stuff late. I feel like the Colts have moved it. Field goal drive to win in Houston and a field goal drive last night to send it in overtime, and then
the touchdown, obviously, and
the touchdown in Houston.
And Kansas City.
Yeah. The 2 field goal drives last night. But then I'm also thinking to myself last night, I'm like, gosh, I mean, there were some good throws, but, man, there are also some throws that are like you're playing 500 in the backyard. You're throwing pop. It's Alec Pierce's dad throwing pop flies to him, and luckily Alec Pierce can run it down. But
you called it 500 growing up?
500.
We called it jackpot.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Yeah.
Justin, wow. How bad do the Colts need these 10 days off? Big question. Is Chris Strasser's offensive line changes more an attempt to save his job, or was it more of an indictment on Chris Ballard's inability to address known gaps? Pryor is an open door. Kudos to Ryman. Tough situation to be thrown into, especially after the injury. Fire Reich for the mental mistakes. Fire Ballard for the losses and the tie. Blow it up and reset like the Pacers. Fan base is drifting away while Ballard laughs at the issues and Irsay angrily hides behind his guitars.
Certainly a lot there from Justin. I'll go back to what I said about training camp, Eddie. It's not like we even saw this sort of offensive line be explored for longer than a very brief period. So that is where I'm thinking to myself, man, was last night the best time to try that? I don't know. Maybe there's an element of you had enough. But, I mean,
element of surprise to even try to throw Denver off.
Element of surprise. Yeah, that's certainly one way to look at it. And I just sit here and think to myself, one of these, first off, I think they are, but one of these hits really going to add up on Matt Ryan. We saw him holding the wrist last night after late in that game. I mean, Russell Wilson's, got a shoulder and this, when does that stuff start to add up with Ryan? I know his career would indicate he guts it out, but he is going to be hit. Right now, he's on pace, I think, for the most hits of his career. And that is just, shit, you can't have it.
With all these disgusting wins, this is from Jake, the Colts will likely finish somewhere around 8-1.
Disgusting win.
Would the biggest disaster of the year be that Chris Ballard continues to believe this team is only one or two players that is not the quarterback position away?
Yes. Yes. I said this last year about the Pacers, Eddie. The Pacers must find, and I probably said this for the last 2 to 3 years about the Pacers, the Pacers must find and answer the question of, is Domantas Sabonis and or Miles Turner, that pairing, is that the future? And finally, they found the answer and acted upon the answer. For the Colts, the question is much more of, the answer at quarterback is the most important thing on this franchise. Most important thing moving forward.
Yeah.
And you have to face that question. This year for the Pacers is less about wins and losses and more about, okay, how does Tyrese Halliburton and Benedict Mathurin look?
If you get me started on talking the Pacers, this podcast may never end.
We will hold off. But and this question, Jake's question, I feel like is part why I was kind of fired up at the start of this podcast about what I heard from Frank Reich and Jim Irsay last night. And someone, tweeted at me, and I totally respect someone asked me, he goes, what do you want them to say? And I thought to myself, you know what? I'd like to think that an owner who is very public and was very public leading into a Tennessee game would respect his fan base enough to realize we're all watching the same thing, and this current product is nowhere near the standard that should be acceptable, and frankly, it's embarrassing. People respect honesty, people respect truth, and I'd argue your season ticket members deserve it. And maybe it's wishful thinking, maybe it's me living in a fairy tale, but I would like to think in the National Football League, from an owner that has been honest, you could get that. And the head coach, I understand. I'm not asking for individual criticism. Frank Reich is never going to sniff that. Totally fine. But some acknowledgement of, Eddie, 7 straight games of 20 points or less. I just read off the defensive rankings of those teams. It hasn't happened for your franchise since 93. Eddie, where were you in 93?
Not even a thought yet.
Thank you. Where was I? Carmel Day Preschool, I think. Not even at Cherry Tree. Walkathon, Friday after lunch. Again, it's just, I feel like the top lacks the accountability. And that's dangerous. And I know those are harsh words. I know they are. But it's worrisome. And to Jake's question, that's where you get at. And I think back to Tennessee, Eddie. Tennessee won a road playoff game with Mike Mularkey in 2017. Road playoff game. What'd they do? At Arrowhead, they won. They fired Mike Mularkey after that. Kansas City, they were making the playoffs pretty routinely with Alex Smith. Baltimore, they could have held on to Flacco for a little bit longer, but no. They felt like we got to do something different. Mahomes in Kansas City, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. There comes a point in time where you've got to look in the mirror as a franchise and realize if we want the ceiling to get higher, we have got to do something differently. And I don't feel like this organization under this current regime has acknowledged that question in a truthful, honest manner. Yeah. It's difficult to find. You guys have heard me say that endlessly. But if Jim Irsay's stated goal is 2 Super Bowls in a decade, and I know a lot of people laugh at that as a fan, I would love hearing that. I love hearing that. That's lofty. That's a big goal. Let's go get it.
Yeah.
The best way to try and do that is to find yourself a signal caller that's going to be here for a long time and gives you a chance to build around. And right now, that's absent.
I was going to say, and some accountability, too. If you hold that standard, you want those 2 Super Bowls in a decade, then if I'm the owner, I would be a little more critical on the guys below me that I'm paying to build my team.
And I think, again, a little bit more critical of last night and realizing that product, that performance is not going to be there if you want to be, a team that's playing into January.
2 more questions pertaining to last night's game. Then we've got some questions prior to last night's game that we'll try to get into. That one guy says, even on a short week, how can Frank Reich and Chris Strasser justify keeping Matt Pryor on the outside? All game long, he was being beat like a drum because he isn't quick enough to be a tackle. Don't feel like this win solved anything.
Yeah, man, for Pryor, it's like, is the interior the better? He changed his body. I think back to Pryor literally laughing and thinking to himself, wait, what, left tackle? That's really where they want me at? I mean, when a guy does that not send a red flag of like, geez, I don't know how confident we should feel. Handing Matt Pryor the left tackle job, and again, I think you saw last night with Ryman, Eddie, in the offseason, I think I told Matt Taylor to look this up at some point, and I know it's impossible to find. But it's like, look up a time a team has started a rookie third-round left tackle in week 1 without injury. Or, and this is the harder one to find, look up a time where someone with the resume of Matt Pryor has been handed the starting left tackle keys entering a season.
Well, the one that comes to mind that is actually happening right now in Chicago, I think they're starting a 5th-round pick at left tackle.
He start week 1 without injury?
Correct.
God, you wonder why the Bears suck.
Yeah.
It's just rare, that position. David Bakhtiari, I think you got to go way back with Green Bay. You just don't see it. And last night, you saw 6 sacks allowed without Randy Gregory.
I'm trying to look up what pick David Bakhtiari was, 'cause I totally forgot about him. He was a 4th-round pick.
I was going to say 4, yeah.
Last one pertaining to last night's game. This is from Colt Maniac. Ugly, ugly win. I don't know what kind of news or change will come during this mini bye week, but I feel something has to happen to spark this team. What's the number one thing that you think could or should happen?
Well, this is, I think, something that is very good to bring up in that what do you do here this 10-day break? You get 2 breaks during the NFL season. Here's the first one. The next one comes in December. So This is your chance to do something. Now, what does that look like? First off, you got to commit to some sort of O-line combination. And on Monday, when you get back on the practice field, you get 4 days, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, to drill that and try and grow it. I mentioned the O-line group earlier. I'd like to see, just little things. Uptick in Pierce's playing time. Uptick in Isaiah Rodgers' playing time. Eddie, you're going to have to develop Dayo Dangbo, defensive end, very quickly. We'll see what Tyquan Lewis is at health-wise. But, with Kwity Paye, high ankle sprain's been the early report on that. If he's going to miss upwards of a month, maybe more, you got to find something there because Paye was playing a lot of snaps for you.
I think Dayo has played pretty well actually over the last 2-3 weeks. He's kind of flashed on tape a little bit.
Yeah, there's been a few more flashes. Selfishly, I'd like to see a little bit more consistency, but I think there's been some flash, which is a step positively.
I just think
in his direction.
I think that explosiveness from the Achilles recovery is finally starting to come back, and that's why.
It's a lot of self-scouting. It's a lot of internal look in the mirror moments because, again, your bye week is what, week 13 or 14?
14,
so if you're going to make a move, this is the time to do it. The last thing I want to have happen is for the Colts to say, we won, that's all that matters. When I hear people say that off of performances like last night, I think to myself, that is such a complacent attitude and mindset.
Yeah.
It's why this podcast does what I liked and what I didn't like, win or lose. Always good and bad. Always good and bad from performances. So we'll see if the Colts make some of those changes.
This question, the next couple will be questions that you received prior to the Thursday Night Football game. This one is from Simpson. Looking at the schedule ahead, obviously the Colts have a proven capability of losing the next 4 to 5 games against the Jaguars, the Titans, the Carson Wentz Commanders, and the Patriots. This may be the most personal and intimately wanted stretch of football by Jim Irsay that he has ever wanted to win. The teams we're all about to play have massive storylines, at least locally attached. If things continue with the status quo, which week would you set the over-under at before we start selling off parts and wash this thing out? Can we really be 2-5-1 heading into the Las Vegas game with no changes outside of right guard, place kicker, and Strog's safety or small lineup changes?
You know, I tweeted this out before the game last night, Eddie. You look at the schedule, and last night included it. You're going to play, I think it's 6 straight games against teams with a record of 500 or worse. You know, you're always going to be in the AFC South mix, no matter what happens. I mean, frankly, even if you lose to Jacksonville and Tennessee, you know, record-wise, you aren't going to be, if you went into some tailspin, like the mathematically eliminated part would not happen for weeks. So, for Irsay to do something, boy, I think it would have to be 3 straight losses. Jacksonville, Tennessee, and Washington.
Especially Washington.
Washington's that one, man. That is the ex-boyfriend right there in front of you coming into your building. And if he gets it done, part of me wishes Carson Wentz were an ass just to kind of see him chirp.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't know, maybe the competitor will come out in him, just from an entertainment standpoint.
I mean, I think didn't he even chirp a little bit in the offseason?
Like chirping for a nice Christian man.
Yes.
You know, like a subtle of like
a subtweet.
Yeah, sub-Instagram here of like me on my tractor or something like that. I kind of forget what the language was, but purely from an entertainment value standpoint, because if I'm not mistaken, I think that's a 425 kick. So that's going to garner a little bit of a bigger audience than normal. God, that'd be great. And you know what? Now that I think about it, Eddie Garrison, if I'm not mistaken, that's Tarrant Glen Ring of Honor game.
Yeah.
That means one Jim Irsay on the field halftime. You know, if Carson wants to warm up that arm a little bit and get a little errant with the throw or two, we could have some fireworks inside of Lucas Oil Stadium, baby.
You're just on one today.
Hey, boring product last night. I'm trying to make things
I was going to say, that's what a couple hours of sleep will do to you right there.
2:15. That was the last I saw last night.
This is from Casey. We'll get a couple more in. Is it way too early to start wondering what the Colts could get in return via trade for Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., and any other player that could net some return? Because we are wasting them and won't likely be good before having to pay or extend them? Or is this type of maneuver really even possible or probable in the NFL? We need a young mobile quarterback on the team that has a friendly rookie contract and rebuild around him.
Boy, do I agree with that last sentence so much.
I do too.
Eddie, you want your next quarterback to have a Michael Pittman, right? You
yeah.
know, I get this element of trade, but I also think, I mean, when's the trade deadline? Like October 30th, I feel like it is. You know, usually it's like that last week of October. Unless the Colts lose literally the next 3, they're not selling. They're not. Now, should they? That's probably a different question, but I think they will retain a lot of these pieces. But, you know, I would always have open communication, always. No matter if I was a good team or not, I always want to know the pulse of the league and where people are at. But
I mean, look at Buffalo, for example. Josh Allen didn't have anybody really. He had Robert Woods, and then you go get Stephon Diggs. I mean, New England's living that right now with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. They don't really have a wide receiver for him to throw.
What Miami did with Tua, what Philly did with A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're sending a message to your young quarterback of we're going to get you something. And I think the Colts need to make sure that when that next quarterback is here, they've got something.
Vegas.
Andrew having Reggie Wayne was huge in 2012.
Vegas with Adams.
Yes.
Although, Derek Carr was already accomplished as it was.
Sure.
This one is from John. We'll try and fit 2 in, including this one. He said he's heard people saying that we can't run it back with Matt Ryan next year, although I get that it's a waste of time running it back and a loss caused. Aren't they handcuffed because they restructured his contract and now he has a $30 million or $35 million dead cap hit next year? Right or wrong on that front, and I just have a tough time envisioning that the Colts eat that, or am I wrong with this assumption?
No, John, you are probably right. I mean, obviously, not every offseason can you find a team as desperate as Washington Commanders were last year. How much are you willing to eat it? If you are, would Matt Ryan retire? Like, would all these hits make him think twice about I'm throwing stuff at the wall right now. I'm just literally talking out loud here. But $35 million on that cap hit.
You got that money?
Eddie, I am in a drought, to say the least.
Is your son able to type yet?
No, he's not. He's able to poop.
That's good. Well, this question comes from Max. That's why I was asking. Hey, Kevin, while listening to the pod today, I started thinking about Reich's play calling. Seems to me that early in the season, his plays are simple and basic. Is this his way of keeping more unique plays off film for the mid to late season? Would explain the constant slow starts on offense. Appreciate your hard work.
Yeah, thank you for that, Max. Great name. I do think Max Bowen, I'm starting to get around on that name more and more. I'm like, that's a nice name.
What'd you go with the middle name if you want to share?
Yeah, we went with Maxwell's his real first name, and then Bradley, which is my father's name.
Okay.
Yeah, Maxwell Bradley Bowen. I do think to this question, at times, Frank is a little bit too tendency-based. And I understand there's a fine line in that, but I think Frank is a little bit too, analytical of, all the second and long runs.
Yeah, I know.
It's like he wants to be so 50-50 in that area of, I just think there's an element of, when you get out on the field, I'm sure the opposing defense at the end of the day is just kind of I don't think they're thinking about endlessly every single number. There's an element of, you just got to play. Last
night, I was tracking it for the first half, and then the second half got underway, and there were a lot of more highlights for me to cut, so I got away from it. But I want to say on their 7 offensive drives that I had documented, on first down, they had passed 5 times. Second down, they had ran 5 times. That was prior to the 2-minute offense that they had there to go into halftime.
Yeah. I remember asking Frank this question during bye weeks, from a self-scouting standpoint of and I'm just throwing out an example here, and he's probably not the best to use an example, but his name is popping in my head. But Hines. When Hines is on the field, you're doing this 71% of the time. Frank will see that number, and he'll want that number to get closer to 50-50.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm all for numbers, but he seems to be a little bit too much really worrisome about that. I said this on Tuesday morning, Eddie, on our daily show, and I didn't say it on the podcast. You watch the 49ers on Monday night. That looks fun. That looks innovative. That looks creative. I watched the Colts offense, and I just think it looks old.
Yeah.
Old.
Yeah.
Old in a lot of the plays and schemes, and old in, I would argue, a lot of the personnel and just kind of how they're built, whereas I just don't feel that with and again, maybe San Francisco is an outlier, and I get it, San Francisco's numbers don't necessarily indicate it's super high-powered attack. I'd argue the quarterback holds it back a little bit with that, but I just like what I see with him.
I'm going to skip over Matt's question and go to Logan's here. Matt, Jordan, Andrew, Joel, we've got your questions. And Walter, we'll try to get to these, I assume, on Monday's pod since we have a little more.
I think we're just going to do Wednesday next week. So I think this pod will kind of take us through, and then we'll do one. I don't know, maybe we can do one on Tuesday, but let's shoot for Wednesday.
All right, this one is from Logan. He's got a pair of questions.
Okay.
First off, he says, love the pod and congratulations again on the birth of your son.
Thank you. Logan. I appreciate that.
He says that I'm not sure who asked this question, but during Frank Reich's press conference after the Tennessee game, someone asked, why is it the same story that things keep on happening over the last 5 years? And Frank didn't really have an answer. I'm assuming this is pertaining to the slow starts at the beginning of the season. If that's what he is telling Jim Irsay and company, why is he still our coach? Secondly, what's your best dad joke?
Oh, my. This is where we need Matt Taylor. Matt Taylor's the king of dad jokes. Matt Taylor brought a book of dad jokes when he filled in with me on the morning show one time, and he literally read one every break. Okay, what was the first one?
Somebody asked after the game against Tennessee in Frank Reich's press conference about why the team is consistently
the slow starts.
Yeah, and he didn't really have an answer for it.
Yeah, and part of me understands that it's probably difficult necessarily to find an answer, but I that's another one where I get to and I'm like, okay, as the head coach of the football team, that would be a bit of alarming to me on the consistency in starting off slow. I mean, hell, we saw it yesterday. I think have the Colts started the ball every game this season?
No. Remember? No, maybe.
I thought that was true. Was it 3 and out yesterday? Yeah, didn't Hines drop the first ball?
Yeah, it was 3 and out.
Yeah, 3 and out. Just constantly. So, yeah.
3 and out.
My best dad joke. Well, how about this one? Colts related. Me yelling at Rosie, "Go to bed. It's past your bedtime."
That's bad.
Is that worse than the Colts offense?
Oh, my.
Ty?
Yeah. 3 and outs, an interception. And then I'm trying to maybe 4 3 and outs and interception. First drive of every game for the Colts.
I'm so embarrassed I ended the pod with that joke.
That's why I just skipped over it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Eddie Garrison right there. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great weekend. Happy fall. Fall weather is here. It's alive and well in Indianapolis. Enjoy Sunday. The Colts won. There are questions, big picture, but the Colts did win. If it makes you cry, try and laugh. And next week is massive. Absolutely massive.
Go Pacers.
Pacers, yeah, nice work. Preseason opener. I've got a large stake in their winning of 30 games this season. We'll see if I'm an idiot
30?
for that. Yeah, I'm going 30. Very good odds for 30 wins.
Oh, I'm sure.
We'll discuss off air. He's Eddie Garrison. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday. This has been Kevin Bowen. Thank you for listening to another edition of Kevin's Corner. If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher for the best Colts and Pacers coverage.